This, my friends, is the brand new 2025 BMW R1300R, and it's really quite a different bike to the R1250R that it replaces. You see, that bike was pretty chilled out and relaxed and a bit of an all-rounder, whereas with this ground-up redesign for the 1300 version, well, they've made quite a lot of significant changes that do make it a much more aggressive bike. It's a significant departure, almost to the point where I'd kind of describe it as like a muscle bike. And so in this video, we'll go through everything that I've learned about it over the past couple of weeks of borrowing it, both good and bad. And then at the end, I'll tell you what kind of biker might want to consider buying one. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Monimoto for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. And if you've got a brand new shiny bike like this, or any other bike for that matter, that's probably your pride and joy, then if it were ever to get nicked, like me, you probably want the best chance possible of getting it back. That's exactly where Monimoto comes in with their latest Monimoto 9, which is a really sleek and stealthy design that makes it as hard as possible to find and therefore remove. You see, the key thing with this is that it's battery powered, so there are no cables to trace back from the bike's battery, and so that should make it much more difficult to trace down and get rid of. Now, how they actually do it is with a little fob. It means that the device itself is really energy efficient, because when the fob's present, it's basically disabled, and so that means that on a single charge, it charges over USB-C. It can actually last up to 12 months, but if the bike does move while the fob's away from it, then potentially it's being stolen, and so that's when it gives you a call. They've specifically chosen a phone call as well because it goes on for much longer than a text message ding or a notification, and so you're much more likely to notice it. And then you can go into the app and get regular updates on the location of your bike, and hopefully that gives you some chance of getting it back. Now, I've been using them for years actually, the previous device as well, but also I've had a Monimoto 9 since it came out, both on my bikes and other vehicles, and it's a brilliant bit of peace of mind, I think at a really decent price point as well, and also the setup is just very simple and very quick, which makes it a bit of a no-brainer. So do check out the links down in the description below to find out more, and also down there we've got a discount code specifically for our viewers for 10% off. So once again, a huge thanks to Monimoto for their support, and with that, let's get stuck into the bike. Now, undoubtedly, the first place you're going to notice a bit of a change in attitude for this bike is with the styling package, which they've done a lot of work to make it a lot more aggressive, I guess, and sporty looking. You can see actually that they're trying to change the image of it with the announcement a week or two back of a factory custom. They turned it into a nitrous-powered drag racer. And so I think that's part of the general attempt to reposition this bike as something a bit more exciting. Now, I think the looks are going to be a little bit divisive. I've posted a few pictures and a short video when the bike first turned up, and it certainly did seem to, you know, split opinions. Some people said, actually, that's a BMW I would consider. Others, I don't think really like this headlight assembly with the radar and the back of the dash. They say it looks like it's got a big forehead. But for me, I really like it. I think it's got some great details. I like this particular finish as well. I like some of the stuff like the wheels with the diamond cut details, this stripe around the rim too. And just, you know, generally, I mean, it's a new frame, a new engine, a new subframe, new bodywork, new headlight, all that stuff. So it just overall looks a lot more dynamic to me and a lot more butch and aggressive and, like I say, almost muscle bikey. I think my favorite view though is like head on, and I know this might sound like a very fanciful comparison, but it sort of reminds me in a weird way of the Street Fighter V4 that I borrowed just a month or two back that also looks very menacing from the front on. I think it's because they're both so wide, it's just that on the Street Fighter it's got the winglets, whereas this has actually got the Boxer twin, of course. But yeah, certainly viewed head on, it's a big wide bike. It's a substantial thing that you'll see in your mirrors if you've got one of these behind you. I will say though, it isn't all show and no go, because of course you've got this new bigger Boxer twin that we've also seen in the GS, the GS Adventure, the RT and the new RS as well. And it is more powerful than the 1250. It has more torque as well. You're talking about 145 horses, nearly 150 Newton meters of peak torque, but also it's a bit more over square now, and so it's happier revving up. It feels a bit more free revving while still maintaining that, you know, signature torquey bottom end, partly aided by the fact that it's got their shift cam, variable valve timing and lift system. So yeah, it's still everything you'd hope for from a Boxer twin in that it's, you know, got plenty of grunt at pretty much any point in the rev range. It's just got a bit more pizzazz and pep, and I think that really comes to the forefront on this particular bike. I mean, more power and eagerness to rev is always going to be appreciated on pretty much any bike, but the others are more touring focused, let's say a GS, a GSA, an RT, whereas this and the RS, to be fair, you know, they're the ones that you're going to take on a good twisty country back road on a Sunday and be able to properly open it up and really get on the gas. And that's pretty much exactly what I did. In fact, for a lot of these shots where we're flying past the camera, we went out to one of the better roads in South Wales, and I had a very good time riding back and forth, up and down on these great roads, while Tim just had to stand there with a camera, unfortunately for him. The only criticism perhaps on the engine front, well, I always say Boxers are, I think, a bit of an acquired taste. The people who like them love them, but it is a specific, you know, delivery of power. It's a very distinctive note at the exhaust as well, and so perhaps not for everybody. And then just the quick shifter. It's great on the downshifts. It's got a lovely sound when it blips on the downshifts, but I find it a little bit too clunky on the upshifts, and so I end up dipping the clutch anyway, and that's pretty common on Boxer twins in my experience. But yeah, not a deal breaker for me. A tiny dip of the clutch smooths it out, and overall this engine is a massive strong point on this bike, of course. Now, another thing that really does play into this more sporty image is the revised riding position, and I think the biggest change is really the handlebars, which are a lot flatter and have you in a more assertive position. Again, it makes it feel much more like a bike that you want to muscle around, and there's just a little bit more weight over the front. You feel more connected to the front end, and so I think it is a touch more appropriate for quicker riding. As for the rest of it, well, it is fairly comfy. I think the seat height is in a similar range. It's maybe 810mm instead of 820, but they do have plenty of options both up and down in the accessories catalogue. And then the pegs, you know, I'd say they're still fairly relaxed and comfortable, and so really it's down to the bars for me, but I do like these a lot. That said, you know, maybe if you're a big fan of the more versatile riding position, let's say of the 1250 version, you know, there is an accessory for higher set bars, and so I think that would make this feel a bit more similar to the previous gen. So if you're thinking about upgrading to this one, but were maybe put off by the flatter bars, then there is a little bit of hope for you there. So yeah, a bit more spicy in the looks department, a bit more peppy in the engine department, and a touch more aggressive when it comes to the riding position. And so where I feel it kind of sits now is more in the middle of the 1250 and a bike like the S1000R. It's still not as aggressive and sporty and twitchy as something like that, but it's moved a little closer to it, I'd say, than the 1250 version, which was a lot more relaxed. That all said, you know, they haven't completely forgotten what made this bike pretty good in the first place, and obviously it's a big seller as well. And so I would say there are still some practicalities and amenities that do make it quite a pleasant bike to ride generally. One would have to be the suspension package, the new dynamic ESA, which is their semi-active electronically controlled suspension, which is an optional upgrade, unfortunately. I think it comes as part of the dynamic pack, or maybe you can spec it up separately. But yeah, it's worth considering because it does get a new feature, which is their variable spring rate. Effectively, it gives you a wider range of adjustability. It's something they first offered on the GS, but I believe this is the first time they've offered it on a traditional fork, because of course that bike's got the telelever. And yeah, with the two modes you've got, so road and dynamic, with road being a bit more comfortable, dynamic being a touch more sporty, it really does feel like a wide spectrum of, you know, suspension response that gives it some real versatility. You can even fine tune in the settings, you know, how soft or firm you want it to be, so you can go 3 points less or 3 points up for either the road mode or the dynamic mode. And I found if you completely backed it off in road, you get a very cushy, comfortable ride, which is perfect for, you know, easy cruising around. But then equally, if you went into dynamic and then you could even firm it up further still, well, it does become very composed, and for what is a reasonably substantial bike, you know, it's still fairly happy being pushed around a bit. Braking, again, is a similar story. This one's got the sport brake pack, but you've got a big caliper at the rear, you've got these radial monoblock calipers up front, and there's lots of power. It needs it for a fairly big bike that can go so quick to haul it up. But also they haven't given it so much bite that it feels really aggressive and on edge. It's actually quite gentle through the stroke at the lever. And so again, I think that just makes it an easier bike to live with. And stuff like when you've got a passenger, it really does help to not have brakes that are super abrupt. But I think the thing we liked most about this bike, because Tim did get a few miles on it anyway, is how grippy it feels and how stable it feels and how confidence inspiring that can be. I guess part of it is the sort of substantial nature of it, but also it's a fairly long bike, it's got a relaxed geometry, and so it is a bike that feels not only comfortable eating up some straight line miles, providing you don't mind the lack of wind protection, but also through a corner it's actually quite enjoyable as well. It's sort of never going to be the quickest turning bike ever, but when it is on its side, it just feels like there's grip for days, and that does make you actually start to want to push it quite hard. So I found it still to be, despite some of these changes that have made it more aggressive, very much a usable bike in a fairly wide range of scenarios. Any criticisms then? Well, I guess that could be one, the weight, which, like I say, isn't all bad. It does give it a certain reassuring feeling when it's out on the road, but still they managed to chop so much weight off the GS down from the 1250 to the 1300, and yet somehow, according to the official spec sheet, this comes in heavier than a GS by 1 or 2 kilos. I've been thinking about it since I picked it up as to how that is physically possible, because it's so similar in many ways, with the same engine and frame and subframe pretty much. Same electronics in many ways. It's just lower slung. It's got the regular fork instead of the telelever front end, but a lot less bodywork as well. And so yeah, I haven't quite figured that one out yet. You know, in some ways, by changing the image, they might have made it more likely to be considered by someone who's generally looking for a naked bike. And so you could say, if you put it in that context, that 240 kilograms just won't be acceptable for some people, but maybe anyone who's already ridden and enjoyed or owned the 1250 will be used to it and could even argue in some kind of ways it's a plus. What's a little more clear-cut though as to whether I enjoyed it or not is some of the rider assistance, which I just found a bit too invasive. And I'm someone who definitely likes active cruise control on a motorcycle. I find it very useful when the motorway is quite busy. But what I didn't enjoy was the front collision warnings, which have some of their most advanced features like automatic braking and this new thing where it can pulse the brakes to get your attention if it thinks you haven't seen the front collision alert on the dash. Maybe it's fine if you live somewhere where there's a bit less traffic, but around Bristol here, the motorways get chocker, and so you almost always end up filtering. And I've got to tell you, it goes off plenty if you're filtering. If you're going between cars, it'll keep grabbing the brakes, but it does it randomly, which becomes really nerve-wracking, especially when you're trying to balance and squeeze through some fairly narrow gaps. It's a bit like when someone sneaks up behind you and grabs your shoulders, and that's not a feeling you want to have when you're trying to, you know, slice through traffic and not clip anyone's wing mirrors. Thankfully, you can turn it off. Both the automatic braking and that little pulsing feature, which, you know, it's less severe, but it's still a bit nerve-wracking as well. And I also found that I turned off the automatic hill hold control. It had come on sometimes when I was at traffic lights and I hadn't really noticed. And when you want to just slip a little bit of clutch or release the front brake to get the bike moving, you know, if you've got a bit of traffic behind you and you've got that feeling it's about to change the lights, then yeah, just get the bike rolling ever so slightly and you'll get a clean pull away. But if the hill holds come on, you need to be more intentional, more gas and let the clutch out further just to get the bike moving. And that slight hesitation when you've got potentially large vehicles sat just behind you. Again, I found it kind of nerve-wracking, and so I turned that feature off. I see nothing wrong with a clean squeeze of the brake lever when you do need hill hold control, but the automatic thing, I just found it like unnecessary, and it came on sometimes when I really didn't want it to. But yeah, fair play. Both of them, you can turn it off. There's a level of customization. And so you could argue they've kind of anticipated that and made it flexible enough to suit, you know, different scenarios. And I will say, once I switched them off, I had a very good time, even on the motorway. And also, you know, the rest of the time, especially on the back roads and stuff like that, fantastic bike to ride. Now, as for the price, well, it starts at £13,200, which is potentially a little bit less than I was expecting, although that is for the base model. And of course, you'd miss out on a lot of the fancy features that I've mentioned through the course of this video. This one, with the dynamic pack that gets you the fancy suspension, the quick shifter, the extra riding modes, I think the sports brake as well, the rider assistance package with the front radar, the option 719 finish with this particular color, and also some of the billet accessories like the levers, reservoir caps, these infills here. This is going to come in more around 17.5 or 18 grand. And there are other ways to push it further still, like if you went for luggage, of course, the comfort pack with the heated grips and seat. And also you can get it with their ASA or automated shift assistant, which allows you to run it in an automatic mode because it takes care of the clutch and shifting on your behalf. So you could potentially get up to, I'm sure, 20 odd. But look, I'd say it'd probably be a really enjoyable bike in that standard form, because what I liked about it most is the stuff that I talked about at the top of the video. The way it looks, the way the engine pulls, the way that you're over the front a little bit more. And so I think I'd get plenty of enjoyment out of it, but I do like the active cruise control, like I've said, and the suspension. And so those would be the most tempting upgrades for me, I guess. Personally, I'd say anyone who's enjoyed the 1250 will probably enjoy this as well, providing you can get on with the looks, and especially if you want all the latest bells and whistles, because there's a lot of tech now available on this bike that simply wasn't on the previous gen. The only caveat, of course, is the riding position. I'd say it is more aggressive, so do allow for a bit of budget to pop the bars back up. But then also, I do think it opens this bike up to a bunch of people who might not have considered it before. I think it has shaken a little bit of that sensible image, and it does make for quite an exciting bike to ride. The key thing is, are you happy with something that's a bit more weighty? Do you like a boxer twin? But if the answer to either of those things is yes, then this is definitely going to be a bike that you should demo. In some ways, it reminds me of like a Baby Rocket 3R. It's got that weightiness, it's got that concept bike looks, single-sided swing arm, shaft drive, even firing intervals in the engine. It's almost like a lighter weight equivalent to that in some ways to ride. That might seem like a weird comparison, but I think that represents how much it's moved on, I guess. So as always, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below. I'll put my review as well of the GS's. I'll put a playlist with the GS and GSA on the screen now, so you can check those out if you haven't already. Do hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.